you saying if it's already said? Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Find a way down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
And here with Senator Van How do you pronounce that?
I pronounce it Keynote.
Keynote.
Yeah, it comes in all forms.
That's great. And thank you everyone of the audience that's joining us live on YouTube and what's left of the people here, because it's kind of late. And after this, we're going to go upstairs and get some fresh air because we've been stuck inside for a whole day.
It's always difficult to be the man standing between the crowd and their first cocktail.
Exactly. So are you, so let's hear a little bit about you. Where you work, where's your main office? You out of where, Reno, out of here, Las Vegas. So tell us exactly like what you do and where you're based out of.
Sure. So I serve in the United States Senate and have for since 2010 when I was first elected. I represent a district that includes all of Carson City, our state capital, and then South Washington County, which includes part of Reno, as well as the North Shore of Lake Tahoe. So that's the northern end of the state, about 400 miles from where we sit currently in Las Vegas. So it's the northern part of the state. We're a part-time legislature, so we only meet for 120 days every other year in odd-numbered years, starting on the first Monday in February. So we had our legislative session in 2021, February of this year, and the session won't go back in until February of 23 on a permanent full-time basis. So we're part-time legislators, we're citizen legislators, we all have full-time jobs, and or we're retired or taking leave of absence from that job, whatever it might be. So it's a good system, but it's pretty unique to Nevada.
So I have some questions. Some of them were based on what happened over the past year. Actually, a lot are related to COVID because Nevada as a state, well, first you had Sheldon Adelson, who's no longer with us at the moment, but he was sort of a big blocker of iGaming. So there wasn't a lot of mobile gaming, meaning casino gaming. For those viewers out there that don't know what iGaming is. So that is now obviously changing. Let's touch on that for just the start about like where the state's moving, because I'd like to know myself. It was kind of stymied for a long time, and now it seems to like have completely changed. So where are we now with the iGaming world as far as Nevada is concerned?
It's probably a flex moment for Nevada when it comes to online gaming, iGaming. The Gaming Policy Committee is a formal board that's been set up under the Gaming Control Board to review the subject for the state. And it's going to start meeting and probably come up with recommendations for where the state should go, and that board will be populated with industry experts and people who really want to look at the issue comprehensively. So we're probably at a moment of transition, but I don't know where that transition is going to go. We have focused on primarily bricks and mortar wagering in our state, and there are some efforts that have recently been pretty public to make changes to that. So we'll see where it goes. I don't have an answer.
So there's no iGaming at the moment, no online casino gambling in Nevada yet.
If you are in properties, yes, but if you're just in your house, you can't pull up your phone and wager on traditional casino games.
So the legislatures and the people that are looking at that now at the moment, are they looking at prior states? Are they looking at New Jersey's model, for example? I mean, Bill Pasquale was here earlier. He's a big lobbyist in New Jersey for the gambling industry. He helped actually get PASPA repealed. So not a real good friend of Nevada, but it's a sort of a, you guys really had the lock on it, but now it's a little different.
Yeah, there was no sports wagering happening anywhere else in the country except licensed casinos.
Oh, Delaware. Yeah, okay. I think there were 3 states. It was Nevada, Delaware, and I think Montana, but that's it.
No, I think that they will probably take a really comprehensive view of what's happening across the country. to see what the next step needs to be for the state of Nevada. But without, I don't serve on that policy committee and or that advisory committee, the policy committee. So where that they decide to try to steer the state through their recommendations, I would want to.
Right, right. All right, so let's get to what we're talking about now. Prior this year, you went before the regulatory board, I think with Shore, or when he did something before the regulatory board, and that was in regards to the Nevada Esports Association.
So what we did during the 2021 legislative session, I had sponsored a bill. It worked. Seth had spoke with Seth during the build-up to the session, and many other people within esports, talking about what might be appropriate from a legislative perspective as it comes to esports. And I approached this through a lens of economic development. I believe that esports is strong now, but will continue to grow, and it can play a significant role in the future of Las Vegas as a destination for tourists, which is our core industry. Putting heads in beds is the most important thing that we do in the state. And I think that what we are going to see with growth in esports industry and ecosystem will position Nevada to be a leader in esports tourism. So that was my hope, and that was the lens that I was looking through this legislative session. And so I introduced a bill that originally created sort of a soft touch sanctioning body for esports events, modeled off the Nevada Athletic Commission, which sanctions unarmed combat, mixed martial arts, and boxing. And the idea was to say, okay, if we're going to be having professional sporting events in our state, which is what we're seeing esports as, is that we're just going to make sure everything's above board and fair, and put the privilege of the state on these events sanctioned. We pivoted during the legislative session to make it something else. We got a lot of pushback from publishers during that process, and I think what we ultimately came up with was creating a new advisory body to gaming control that is focused on when there's going to be wagering on esports and what, if any, rules they should consider for wagering on esports on a go-forward basis in our state.
So let me just touch on this. You got pushback in the publishers. So let's start there, because the pushback would be, well, we don't want to get involved with you guys because we're nervous about our how that's going to look if we're engaging in the gambling world or approving the world. Was that the pushback that was there, or maybe you could just expand a little bit more about that pushback from the publisher side? Because the thing is, since I started the Casino Esports Conference, and since we've been talking about esports and the merger between those two industries of casino esports, the biggest pushback has been from publishers. They have issue in sending their people to come speak at our events. We did have Jay Moses one year from Take Two Media and GTA, the game GTA, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's been pushback. So let's go into this side from the legislative side, what that pushback was.
So if you think about what the bill originally looked like, they sort of sanctioned a body that had some sort of regulatory oversight of esports. That was, from the publisher's perspective, sort of government getting in their way. Right? And that wasn't my goal. Right? My goal was to try to create a facility for engagement with the ecosystem so that it would attract events to Las Vegas. So they are primarily unregulated anywhere in the world. And to have a single state start putting regulations in place over competitions that they may control in a vertically integrated structure didn't make a lot of sense to them, and I understand that from their perspective. They also had, I think, concerns over potential hodgepodge regulatory environments from state to state to state that wouldn't make a lot of sense for them on a go-forward business model. So look, they came forward with, I think, some really valid concerns about the structure that we had originally created that had a regulatory function. Now, when we start shifting to a discussion about wagering, the publishers are not unified on this subject. There are some that I think are going to be moving in this direction, and some that will just say we do not want wagering on our events. Period. And I think we should respect all of those opinions and positions. And if there are publishers that are hypersensitive to the age of the majority of their players, they shouldn't probably want wagering on their events, right? And so I think that my hope with the Technical Advisory Committee, which is now being stood up for the Gaming Control Board here in Nevada, is that they'll be able to hear all of these opinions and come up with a structure that allows for that diversity within those different publishers' board members, because they have legitimate reasons for wanting it or not.
Well, it's funny you say that because there's ESIC and there's WESCO, which is the World Esports Coalition. Daniel Coase is going to be speaking tomorrow. He's the president of that. Here's ESIC, Esports Integrity Coalition, based in London. They're not connected government-wise, but because you're government, then the publishers are like, okay, we don't want you. It's okay to have ESIC. It's okay to have WESCO. It's okay to have the IESF, the International Esports Federation, based out of South Korea. But when a state senator decides that he wants to say, I want fairness amongst this issue in regards to, you're speaking for the people because that's your job. So why, in my opinion, we might be getting too deep into this, and you don't want to cover it, but I want to know why a publisher wouldn't be interested in the safeguard of that consumer, because wagering and video gaming competitions and the wagering on those competitions are happening regardless. So wouldn't it be in the best interest of the public to have government step in and work with these publishers, and also set up a situation where not only are the publishers safe and guarded because you have their best interest in mind, but you have the people's best interest in mind. And if you're both connecting each other, or you're protecting the people and the publishers, then the casino industry can then come in a much safer sandbox, so to speak.
Yeah. I think first, business generally doesn't have faith when someone says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And that's what I was doing. So I recognize some standoffishness when it comes to a government entity coming in and saying we're going to create a regulatory environment for the first time. Because they're companies, huge multinational corporations that are functioning well and having success under the current model. So I understand their initial reaction. I do tend to agree that a stable and sort of unified structure will create a rising tide that floats all boats. And you're absolutely correct. The way that it's positioned now, as it relates to wagering in particular, is directly in line with what Nevada's interests are in protecting our customers, the residents of our state, but also all of our tourist guests who make wagers in our state. So ensuring the integrity of competition is I think, a critical state interest on a go-forward basis. The compromise that I reached with the publishers as it related to the Technical Advisory Committee on wagering was with their input. And they moved from a position of opposition to a position of neutrality on the bill when we made those pretty significant amendments. I do believe that as the industry continues to evolve and grow, that there probably will be some space for some broader look at whether it is a sanctioning body or a regulatory commission, some sort, whatever it might be. And we may just not be there yet. The industry may not be there yet. But I do think it would behoove everyone to think about that on a prospective basis and not a reactionary one. We don't want to have to do that after there's some big congressional investigation into match fixing, right?
Right.
That's not what the position we want to be in. That wouldn't be good for the industry. That wouldn't be good for the ecosystem. If we can get ahead of that and ensure that, because then if we regulate it and we mess up, that's our fault, right? That's not the publisher's fault. That's not the tournament organizer's fault.
Yeah.
That's something that blame falls on us, and there's some shield for the industry if something bad happens. So I think that there's definitely been some meeting of the minds, I believe, and we've moved in a positive direction, and I continue to have really positive dialogue with various publishers and their association who are actively engaged. I have never really been done.
That's awesome. That's great. So at the moment, with all that having been said, and then with the COVID issues, and with the lack of actual casino gaming online, I mean, when all the casinos had to close, there were a lot of people laid off, and there was a lot of economic downturn. I mean, it definitely made up for it this summer in a lot of ways, but there was a lot of economic downturn. If there were these safeguards in place, I mean, God forbid we don't have to go through another pandemic, but if we happen to, do you think that the state of Nevada will look at, the metaverses, the online experiences, the gambling abilities to be online as that fallback? I mean, it's always great to have it. I mean, New Jersey basically survived that because they have such a robust online casino products. I mean, what's the I know we talked earlier about iGaming, but what's the take on the state legislator side of how can we make sure or put in safeguards that if we have to shut down? We just heard from Louis Alfieri, who just flew from Spain to New York to here, and it was a miserable experience. We're also experiencing, or at least Nevada and Las Vegas, which is an international city, they saw a massive upturn this summer with people that have been locked in their houses for 2 years domestically, but you still are missing that international visitor. So that is still a struggle. And as we move into the winter months, you were going towards CES is coming in, which is a massive international show, puts that going to look like, and how does that affect the ecosystem in the state of Nevada when it comes to the casino gambling? So ask just whether or not they're looking at that as a safeguard. In other words, iGaming, online gaming, and esports.
I think that's a really critical question. I think it's one that probably the Gaming Policy Committee is going to tackle as it starts moving into this discussion about iGaming. And during the shutdown, there were times when esports tournaments were the only things where wagers were being placed, and that's quite a thing, right?
But you couldn't get a piece of it. That's the problem.
Well, everything goes down to who gets a piece of it, right? But even in terms of sanctioned events that were for wagering in Nevada, the Gaming Control Board was approving esports tournaments. So the question about, I think, the future of how to insulate Nevada from another economic shutdown is an interesting one. I mean, our recovery is remarkable, right? We're getting a lot of other state stimulus money right now.
Exactly.
Right? We're having record months, the best months in the history of Las Vegas this summer, and that is with no international tourism. That is not with anyone else coming in from overseas. That is purely domestic travel.
But the faster you go up, the quicker you fall.
Yeah, potentially. So we have these other legs of the stool that still need to be erected, right? The convention and tourism business is still, the convention business is still on its way back up, right? So if you think about the visitors to Las Vegas as a three-legged stool with domestic leisure tourism and convention business and then international, we're having record months with one leg of the stool, basically. So as those international travel restrictions are eased, and as convention business continues to return, I think we're going to see a leveling off. And so any erosion of that domestic leisure traveler because of some contraction in their expenditure ability should get picked up by those other two legs of the stool. But again, that gets back to our traditional base, and we want to make sure that is solid. That's what we do here. It's what we do better than anywhere else in the world. But you're asking the question of what's next, and what I do know is this: is that Las Vegas reinvents itself better than anybody else, and we find a way to survive, and not just survive but thrive, and be positioned for the next big thing. And we're seeing it now. Nevada is becoming, or Las Vegas is becoming a sports tourist destination for the first time really in its history. I'll be at Allegiant Stadium for the Bears-Raiders game next Sunday. It will be a great time. That's an amazing facility. T-Mobile Arena. We've got
Golden Knights.
Yeah, Golden Knights. There are always new reasons to come here, and I just think esports is going to be a piece of that going forward. That's what I'm really excited about.
Well, I drive around town. I mean, I don't live here, but I do drive around town, and I see there's a warehouse I passed called it's BattleBots. So you got BattleBots going on. You got the Area 15 there, and it's getting to that point. But let's just get back to esports in general, and overall. You're saying that Nevada, as a legislature, as a state, is very bullish on these things. So there's no doubt about that. But what about, and how could it, we're talking about Nevada as a whole, but how does the casino industry adopt more relatable products in esports? And if they want to do such kind of a product, can they, how would they set up regulatory laws in place for not just, we're talking esports, but we're also talking beyond that. So, Area 15 has the VR experiences and stuff like that. But if you're going to, let's say somebody came along, a game developer, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, because if you're going to be, if you want to be the center of esports, you really should be a place where developers want to build. So we'll get to your tech hub. How do you want to build that? Because that's just an extension of this industry. It's an extension of this culture. And so how does a casino, if they want to pivot towards much a younger demographic, and they want to create a virtual reality game that people can play, but they can bet on each other. Like I could bet you, and you could bet me, and whoever wins gets the pot, casino gets a rate. What are the steps that a casino or even a game publisher would have to take to get to be approved for that type of gambling?
Well, there are our wagering laws and regulations are pretty well structured, and I can't speak specifically to the steps that to create something like that at this point. So, but what I think is that what you're talking about is sort of how to get that fan, organic, esport enthusiast engaged at a wagering level. And I think that there are probably a variety of ways to do that through our existing wagering and regulatory structures. And I think it's really important because the esports in particular, I mean, in the same way as any other sport, is really built out by an organic fan base. The people who play those games at home, right, and then watch the best in the world do it in a competitive environment. So if there is a way to sort of create a a destination event, right? Whether it's a tournament, a championship, whatever it might be, and then provide the opportunity for participation of that organic fan base. I think that starts getting really exciting from a tourism perspective, or a reason that people want to come. Not only do they get to go attend the event, watch the best people in the world do it, but they get to play in ancillary tournaments themselves. They get to have fan experiences with pros, whatever it might be. You can build that out in esports in a way that you can't really do with the NBA or the NHL or the NFL, right? So I think it's a pretty exciting opportunity for fan engagement to mix with professional events really seamlessly.
Well, then, because we're esports obviously is competitive video game play. You can compare it to sports, but a lot of people say that's different. It's not really the same. It's more entertainment, and it is competitive play, but it is more entertainment on the entertainment side, which should float like the boat of Las Vegas, because now you're talking about people who want to compete on a gambling level, because gambling is also competition. If you're sitting at a poker table, you want to beat the house, of course, or you want to get the best hand, you want to win. That's the point. So my question is then, if you want to bring this community, we touched on community, because esports and the backing of it really stems from the community. Just like every other, like even conventional sports, it's a community-based thing. I mean, the Raiders now have a big community. They came to Las Vegas, they moved from Oakland, and now there's a community that's sort of built. But football, everybody knows about it. Now, esports is a little bit more confusing because you have multiple games. So it's like having football, soccer, baseball, and there's like people, fans for all of them, and they build these communities out. That community also brings technology, because those people are connected to technology. Would the state ever consider doing something where, and you touched about the publishers, giving those people, those creatives that make the games themselves, any type of tax incentives to create studios here, to engage in regulatory issues, if they came and set up shop here, set up some kind of wagering esport division of their publishing company in Nevada. Is that something that would be open to discussion in the state?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an economic development structure that focuses on key industries, and technology is one of them. Technology is a big word, right? But ultimately, these are tech companies, right? And it's one of
entertainment tech companies.
It's one of the reasons that I particularly liked, the focus on esports as an economic development tool, as a tourism tool, is because it's not just tourism, but it is, if you can create an ecosystem, a sort of magnet for technology companies themselves working in that space, whether they're publishers or event tournament organizers or broadcasters or whatever it might be, those are, it's sort of a niche within a broader technology category. And the state offers economic development incentives for jobs created, for capital investment, for a variety of different things. We offset what is already a low tax liability in the state. So we do stand ready to engage with any companies that want to think about being in Nevada as a place to do business.
Yeah. So it's, I want to get to my next point, not necessarily something that's...
Yeah, sure. Before we do, I'll jump in as well, because when it comes to innovation, I also think a lot of it needs to be organically grown. You can't just buy all the companies from California, right, to come to your state. And there's good, I think, organic growth happening in Nevada as well. UNLV is doing a great job with its Blackfire Innovation Center, and its engineering program is turning out fabulous students and graduates who are discovering and inventing things that are going to change the world. And so UNLV is a great destination for that type of innovation, and they have industrial supports for young companies as well.
Wow. So that's what I wanted to get to, actually. So there's a big round building that's being built. That's by the wind in Sands Convention Center. And that's basically massive, immersive, like, think of, like, I guess, the IMAX on steroids.
365-degree experience. It's the Madison Square Garden Sphere, right? Being constructed by Las Vegas Sands in partnership with MSG.
Right. So going in that, in this sphere that, like, might even make some people nauseous, but nonetheless, my question is that enough? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's cool and all, but it's like, you have an audience, a younger audience. This is a little bit off topic in regard to legislation, but you have an audience that's hungry for something that's really going to knock their socks off, because they can strap on a VR headset at home and just be immersed in just amazing technology already. Like we had the panel before, you have to bring the people in to something that's really exciting. And that's what I mentioned before, because one of my questions was, you set up this massive immersive sphere, but is that enough? Like, I think, in my opinion, like younger people between the age of 21, or the demographic of the group 21 to 40, and I talked to a lot of them, would be like, they're like, yeah, if I could go to a casino and play video games and win money, yeah, I'm in. So that's what I'm saying. Is like, that's cool and all, and it's great, and concerts are great. It's like it's the same thing, but now it's on steroids. It's even bigger. It's better. It's like you keep going bigger and better with the same idea. But the question is, where do we make that now? Say, okay, we got to go bigger and better with a new idea, and then get the gambling side of Nevada, which has always been its sort of like, its foundation, connected to that.
Probably the best way to answer that is to say that what we are doing is, at the very least, laying the technological foundation and underpinnings to be ready whenever we discover what that next thing is, right? So if we just built out a massive expansion and renovation of the Las Vegas Convention Center run by the LPCBA, and the technology investment in that building makes it prime for whatever's next. The same is true with Allegiant Stadium, right? And the Sphere is going to be the same way.
You haven't invited me to Allegiant Stadium yet, so.
All right. We'll find a game. Making sure you're investing properly and you're hiring the right people to know what needs to be installed from a technological perspective is really critical to being ready to take that next step. And if it's an immersive cube, right, where it's a virtual reality space, right, where you can walk around, turn a room like this into a virtual reality space. That's all well and good if you can envision it, but if you don't have the technological underpinnings to support it, then it's not going to happen.
Great. Engineering is key.
It is.
On the back end.
It is. So being ready for that is critical, and we're doing that. The investments that we've made, particularly in the convention center and in these new facilities, are ready for whatever's next.
Now, we're going to wrap up, but I have one last question. Something interesting I recently saw about a moon thing casino. A moon. It's called the Moon.
This one's new to me. I don't know.
Okay, so there's something that somebody's building a moon, and then in there you can actually go and feel like you're walking on, but physically walking. It's not a virtual reality. So they're going there. What I'm trying to point out is that it is a place, or Vegas can be a place, or Nevada can be a place of what's next. But how do you? This is a question for you though. Everyone, when you think of Nevada, they always think of Las Vegas. They think of Las Vegas. They think of Las Vegas. Reno's got a pretty good, they got a pretty good thing going up there too. So
Reno's cool, man.
How can we sell Reno here to our visitors, to people watching at home, that's just as good a place as Vegas to visit?
Well, I live in Reno. Reno's my home, and I love this city. it is a very different city than Las Vegas. And a lot of people have thought of Reno as just sort of a smaller Las Vegas, but it has really changed dramatically since, over the past 20 years. Really, when Indian gambling took off in Northern California, Northern Nevada had to change, right? Because we weren't going to have people driving from the Bay Area into Reno to gamble, and we have, and so we still have a downtown with a casino core and that, but that's only part of the reason to go to Northern Nevada, right? And so I live in South Reno. I can be on the shore of Lake Tahoe in a half an hour. I can be on a chairlift skiing in 20 minutes. I can be fly fishing the Truckee River in about 45. I can be hiking in the wilderness. If you like the outdoors,
Is that all year round?
it's a great place. Well, you can't ski year round.
Okay, well,
But I can always be on the shore of Lake Tahoe.
right.
As long as I can get up the mountain. So from an outdoors perspective, it's a tremendous place. And we have a lot of young tech companies starting and relocating into the Northern Nevada region. We also have a really significant manufacturing sector that's growing. So there's a lot happening. Housing prices are insane, and it's hard to find a place to live because so many people want to be there right now. So it is. This state is a great place. Again, there's 400 miles between here and Reno, and you can find something for just about anywhere.
It sounds great. Senator, I appreciate it, and you taking the time and coming down the 400 miles from Reno. Although thank God you didn't have to leave the state, which is great. But I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here at Keynote. And we hope to see you at future casino esport conferences and maybe at some GameCons too.
I hope so. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Next upstairs, and after that, we're gonna have tons of food, tons of alcohol. Anybody you know, call them. I've already paid for it, so enjoy the view up there.
Yeah.
But call some people, tell them to